So,
Okay.
hello, joining me today, Kevin Oakes, the CEO and founder of the Institute for Corporate Productivity, which is a leading human capital research company in the world. Hello, Kevin. Thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, thanks, Amnia. Glad to be here.
So, you have written a book about cultural renovation, and can you talk to us a little bit more about what is it that requires corporate culture to change overall?
Yeah, just taking a step back, culture is one of the biggest reasons why a company has financial success or does not. It's incredibly correlated to the bottom line business impact of the organization. And so a lot of CEOs, particularly if they're a new CEO or if things aren't going quite as well as they'd like, they have interest in how to change culture, but aren't quite sure how to do it. And we had found through our research that of all the companies out there that have tried to change culture, only 15%, 15%, actually succeed at doing so. Most fail miserably at changing culture. And so we conducted a study, one of the largest culture studies ever conducted of 7,000 organizations, and looked at the culture change efforts and what worked and what didn't. And from that came up with a blueprint of 18 action steps that organizations can take to proactively create a healthier culture inside the organization. And that's called culture renovation. We were originally using the term transformation, which most people use. But as we got into our research, we realized that those successful companies did not transform their culture. They didn't completely change it. Instead, what they did, like you would with an old house, they carefully renovated their culture and kept what made them good to begin with, what was unique and hard to replace, and just built on top of that in order to increase value, like you would do with an old house. So that's why we call it culture renovation.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about how can we create a healthy culture within the organization, as you mentioned. What are the key trends that other smaller organizations or organizations that are suffering could possibly use from your experience?
Yeah, while a lot of this starts at the top, the CEO and the senior executive team have to be on board with creating a healthy culture inside the organization. It takes a cooperative, collaborative effort from the workforce. There are a number of traits that identify a healthy culture. One of which is you have a learning culture where the company is freely sharing knowledge. They're actively learning on a regular basis, as opposed to a culture where people hoard knowledge and use knowledge as power inside their organization. That's one example. What we've found is a real key. Now, keep in mind, there are 18 action steps, so there's a lot of things that go into changing a culture. But one key is identifying the influencers and energizers inside the organization and making sure that they're on board with what you're attempting to do when changing culture. In every organization, there are people that others turn to for subject matter expertise and for information at the moment of need. But a lot of times you turn to these people for energy. You walk away from that conversation more fired up and more excited than you entered the conversation. Conversely, there are people that kind of suck the life out of you. You walk away from that conversation and you just feel depressed. It's important to discover who those people are, but if you ask senior leadership who those people are, they generally will get it wrong. They think in terms of hierarchy, and a lot of times these energizers and influencers are buried in the hierarchy, and sometimes they're introverts, they're not extroverts, so they don't necessarily stand out. So there's a technique that we use called organizational network analysis that allows organizations to uncover those hidden superstars and then make sure that when whatever you're trying to do with your culture, they're on board and can make it happen at the ground level.
Why do you think they are hidden? Why are they not out there?
Well, like I said, they're often buried in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
So those go-to people in any organization aren't necessarily the people at the top. And sometimes, as I said, they're introverts, right? They're just not, they're not loudly trumpeting, themselves, and they're not promoting themselves necessarily. These are just people who have the right information, and a lot of things flow through. And so it's important to know who those people are for a variety of reasons, culture renovation being one of them. But those people are most at risk for burnout inside the organization. They're also most at risk to leave because they're not being recognized necessarily a lot of times. And when they do leave, a lot of the processes tend to fall apart very quickly and take a long time to rebuild when you've got one of these important cogs out of the organization all of a sudden.
Right. You did speak about leaders a while back and how they can actually find these kind of people, but I want to know, how can leaders learn from others and create the environment that enables such, learning experience within employees and their leaders?
I'll reference Satya Nadella at Microsoft, who I think has been a great champion of this concept. And I profile Microsoft at the beginning of the book because I think the culture renovation that he and the team instituted has been one that others can emulate, whether you're a big company or small company, in tech or not. I think a lot of what they've done is very replicable. But Satya has been very vocal in saying he wants a culture of learn-it-alls, not a culture of know-it-alls. And frankly, prior to Satya becoming CEO of Microsoft, there were a lot of know-it-alls in Microsoft. Today, they are rewarding people who are learners and sharing knowledge. It's something that they recognize throughout the organization. But he's also very visible, as is his senior leadership team, in learning activities. And so they are constantly sharing what book they're reading, what they've learned, but they're also showing up at different internal learning opportunities. And I love the idea of leaders as teachers. We've written an entire research study on that concept. It's something that Jack Welch and GE popularized many years ago, where leaders actually actively teach inside the organization. And there's a tremendous amount of benefits that happen from that. It's still a small percentage of companies that have leaders as teachers as a formal program, but those that do tend to be off the charts, high-performing organizations.
Right. I wanted to tap a little bit about the rewards and best performance, rewards and best performance for employees. And I was just, as you speak, I was wondering, what is really the idea, if there is an ideal way to make sure that people are recognized in the workplace? Is it promotion? Is it just, saying, hey, this person is doing great? Is there an ideal way for that?
Well, I think the ideal way is to do it frequently in the organization, and across the organization. You don't necessarily need to provide monetary rewards or big rewards to people to recognize their impact on the organization. Simple recognition from leadership goes a long way, and so I'm constantly coaching and telling people that they need to do that. I need to do it more in my own organization, where you are praising the great results, from different employees inside the company. But certainly longer term, I think the more that you can promote from within and move talent from within, the healthier you are as an organization. I've written about this as well, and it's based on research that we've conducted around talent mobility. Companies that are really good around formally moving people around the organization, placing them in different roles, giving them different responsibilities, they too tend to have very healthy cultures and be high-performing organizations. And so I think rewarding people by giving them greater exposure inside the organization through a mobility effort can also go a long way.
Is there a healthy indicator to figure out that this company is actually having healthy corporate culture versus any other?
A lot of companies have a culture scorecard, or some call it a dashboard, where they look at multiple measures on how the culture is doing. And that's really the key. It's not to rely on one measure around the culture. It's to look at several different things. So your employer net promoter score might be one, and our employees recommending this as a great place to work to their family and friends, and see how that eNPS score is improving or decreasing over time. Looking at more common things like attrition or retention inside the organization, and looking at it by demographics, types of people, locations, et cetera, and looking at that over time. Also looking at your external reviews. So what are people saying on Glassdoor and social media about the culture and about the organization, looking at that over time. And you can see I'm ending all of these on over time, because that's really the key. It's never about a point in time. It's always looking at trends. And so many companies look at their employee engagement score and try to assess, is the culture healthy or not from that employment engagement score. That is just one point in time. You've got to look at it. How is it tracking over time? And that would be another, metric to look at, but I wouldn't rely on that one solely to measure the health of the culture.
So basically a different kind of measurements. And of course, employee retention is part of it as well. My final question is, the key here is over time. And I was wondering, is there a quick fix for companies that cannot wait over time? And they just really have a problem that they need to solve now?
Well, the general answer is no, but it kind of depends on what the problem is. So, for example, if you have a lot of companies tolerate what I call brilliant jerks. So these are people that are very competent at their jobs and produce results, but leave just a trail of destruction in their wake as they accomplish it. That can be very damaging to a culture, and healthy cultures don't tolerate that. They reward the method to get to the results just as much as the results themselves, and they look at the end doesn't justify the means. So I do recommend to companies fix that quickly if you've got that scenario, and most companies do. So that's one thing that can be fixed relatively quickly. But more broadly, it takes a while to change a culture. You have to be somewhat patient, but it doesn't take forever. Again, I'll point back to Microsoft. I think Satya and the team made some really good improvements in a very short period of time. Now, they get very nervous when I talk about how great their culture is, because they say, look, we've got a lot of things to fix. We are not perfect, and they aren't. No company's perfect. And it's an ongoing battle. You never sort of plant a flag in the ground and declare victory. This is something that you're constantly working on to improve over time.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Kevin Oaks, for your time. Any final thoughts?
No, I'm looking forward to the conference, Omnia, but I appreciate you taking the time to interview me.
Thank you. Have a great day ahead.